pesky first-in-the-nation primary thing drew out quite a bit of attention over the last few weeks, but now we're getting into the real fun part of the legislative session in Concord. And to help give us some insight into what's going on under the dome, we have two Senate leaders, Senate Majority Leader Jeb Bradley, Senate Minority Leader Jeff Woodburn. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. Much appreciated.
Great to be here.
First, a couple of items that don't involve any legislation. The day of the primary, the governor announced her appointment as banking commissioner, Senator Jerry Little, a colleague of both of yours. He previously worked for 2 decades as the chief banking lobbyist in New Hampshire. This appointment immediately raised red flags with progressives. Senator Woodburn, do you think that Senator Little is the right man for that job?
I think Jerry Little is a strong candidate. He's a person of integrity, decency. I trust his judgment. He has proven to be a good senator, and clearly we do have differences of opinions, but I think our body, we get a chance to see people up close and personal, and I have full confidence in his ability to balance. This is an industry where he came from. I don't think we have had many of our banking commissioners have come from the industry. Comparing Wall Street banks to New Hampshire banks is not a correct comparison. So, I think that the calm, smart people will look and say, the network and the ideas that Jerry's been talking about and doing his entire life, particularly in the time that I've known him, he's a solid person.
Senator Bradley, the appearance many would criticize here is of a revolving door. Do you think that's an accurate?
No, absolutely not the case. I mean, we're going to really miss him in the Senate. He's on the finance committees, just done a terrific job, and he does his homework, he works hard, he assembles the facts. He'll do the same thing at the Banking Commission. He really knows the banking laws well, having served, as the CEO of the New Hampshire Bankers Association. But I don't see that as any kind of a conflict or a problem at this point. He's been away from that several years now. He had retired. He was talked into running for the Senate, and I'm sure now that he was talked into, by Governor Hassan of being the bank commissioner, but he'll do a great job.
All right. There's another appointment out there in the balance right now, and that is of drug czar. And certainly we've seen a lot of attention on that issue. And right now we're hearing from firefighters, first responders, police, that things, at least in Manchester, despite all of this effort and all of this hard work, are still getting worse and not better. When we appoint a new drug czar, do you think the governor should be looking at someone who's an outsider, someone who can potentially rattle some bureaucratic cages, gather more attention to this issue, or an insider who perhaps can restore some confidence and competence to the position? Senator Bradley, we'll start with you.
Well, I think that no matter who gets appointed, it's a daunting task. We have to do a better job of all 3 phases of interdiction, recovery, and treatment, and prevention too. So these things, even though we've passed a number of pieces of legislation, a lot more money into drug and substance abuse funding, it's going to take time, and I think people have to realize that. I mean, in particular because of the impact of fentanyl and how dangerous fentanyl is. The position of drug czar is very important, but one person isn't going to solve a problem overnight.
Senator Woodburn, what are your thoughts?
I think Senator Bradley is spot on. I mean, we're not going to solve this overnight. We're going to solve it with a plan. We need additional resources. We need to support the person who's in that position, not let partisanship get in the way, and really get to work on this issue. And I think there's a lot more that we need to be. We've made good progress thanks to Senator Bradley and his leadership over the summer, but more needs to be done. Clearly, we're not doing enough around this issue.
Do you have any particular people in mind you'd like to see in that job?
I don't, and this is a process that will have to work its way out. I mean, it is something that I think we have to all agree that this is a person we're going to work with. And if suggestions, I know the governor is always open to listening to ideas and suggestions of people that could effectively lead this position.
The New Hampshire Health Protection Program, aka Medicaid expansion. Both of you guys are in the Senate. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get a House member here, and that's sort of where the action is going to be on this. There's a general consensus somewhat in the Senate. Senator Bradley, what are the keys that you see to this piece of legislation that you're backing, making it out of the House intact to your Senate?
Well, I think that the legislation speaks for itself, and I think the more people have understood its implications for New Hampshire, that's why you've seen the initial House vote as strong as it was. I mean, so what are some of those implications? First of all, 47,000 people who are low-wage workers would lose the health insurance that they have. They've slipped through the cracks of Obamacare. We have a New Hampshire plan that, yes, it uses federal funds to provide insurance for them. But there's also a very, very positive impact on New Hampshire businesses because, you know, these folks get sick just like everybody else, and they show up in the emergency room. It's the most expensive treatment out there, and they can't compensate the hospitals for it. So the hospitals then cost shift it to everybody else with private insurance, and it's one of the reasons we have among the highest health insurance costs in the nation. So I think that, you know, we have put together a New Hampshire plan, has no new taxes, no increased taxes, no impact on the state's general fund. It will be funded with voluntary contributions from hospitals and the insurance companies, the small state share that has to be part of it. And lastly, in the middle of a heroin epidemic, which we just talked about, the fact that 47,000 people, some 6,000 of whom access to substance abuse benefit is life-saving. So I think as, you know, the skeptics look at the facts of the matter, they're going to see that this is a pretty good plan.
Senator Woodburn, do you support the work requirement provision that is in this bill?
Yes, work is important. It has to be part of a plan. It has to be workable so people do get the benefits and we get them moving on. And people are moving on. I mean, the story that hasn't been told has been the people that have moved through the program, and you know, you either move up and make more money or you die. I mean, that's the only way you get off it, the way I look at it. And this is a good program. New Hampshire should be proud, Senator Bradley, as the architect bringing people together with very diverse interests. There's only one reason to be against, and that's ideological, is you don't want to take federal money to help New Hampshire. It is a deal, a great deal at every level, because there's no New Hampshire commitment of money in. We've been able to find others to pay for it. We get the benefit, $450 million into our economy. And I would say very proud that all 10 Democrats in the Senate are ready to renew. We're ready to renew now. But we appreciate the work that everyone has done and look forward to getting this passed and keeping this program going.
Should it be made permanent? Obviously, we're going to have a debate about this again at some point.
You know, that's not really a relevant issue because, you know, the idea that if we debate it 2 years from now, I believe the evidence will be clear that we need to keep it. The more we have this program, the better the results will be, the longer data we will have to be able to compare what it's doing for local hospitals, people, and it's a financial win, it's a health win, it strengthens communities, strengthens families, and we're doing it without any additional taxes, as Senator Bradley had mentioned. So I just don't see, beyond the ideological piece, how people can oppose this, and I appreciate the good work.
And Senator, what do you tell Republicans when they come to you and say, how can you possibly support this? I mean, when I was at various rallies, particularly Trump and Cruz, one of the state level conversations that was going on was we have to stop Medicaid expansion. What do you tell those people when you debate them essentially on this issue?
Well, again, I think the facts speak for themselves. It's helping to lower health insurance rates. There's ample taxpayer protection, and the 2-year authorization that Jeff mentioned is one of those to ensure that the federal government keeps its commitment. It's helping in the middle of a heroin crisis, and 47,000 people are much more productive in their lives. And yes, we use federal funds, but we don't seem to have too much problem taking federal funds for improving our highways or education dollars or environmental dollars or any number of other things. Why would we not take our money when we're a donor state? Let's remember, we send $1 to Washington, we get back 81 cents. This helps solve a problem. It pushes down, you know, the rising healthcare costs while insuring people. Those are the arguments that I think, you know, New Hampshire Republicans need to hear. And I think as we have made those arguments, that's why this bill does have the bipartisan support it's enjoyed so far.
And if I said there's 48,000 people that are getting health care today that didn't have it before. They were getting it at the wrong place and very expensive cost to our hospitals and our healthcare system. And you know, you look at somebody who we would pay for, we'll pay for Narcan, but we won't pay for drug treatment. I mean, those are the kind of unwise investments that we need to turn around and say, what is the best, most effective way to help a person, but also cost effective. And you know, we need to renew this. We need to. Democrats are one 100% ready to vote today to renew. We appreciate the work and look forward to getting this program renewed.
Another issue that's perhaps looking more long-term, commuter rail. One thing that's interesting to me is you gentlemen both occupy leadership positions, but geographically, you're from the Lakes region, you're from the North Country. I'm very curious to know what you think about this issue and whether or not you think commuter rail to southern New Hampshire would be a benefit to your constituents in more northern parts of the state. Senator Woodburn.
Sure. Obviously, it's a long ways from any connection from where I come from in Whitefield, but I think our transportation is vitally important. It is what drives our economy. We got to get people to the North Country and to the rest of the state to enjoy our scenery and spend some money, but also people who want to leave here to go to other places, the ability to get there and not have to drive in Boston, which is a lot of folks in the North Country aren't comfortable with that kind of traveling. But we are connected to a regional economy, and when Nashua succeeds, people have money in their pocket, they come and spend it in the North Country. So there is a benefit to our region.
Your thoughts, Senator Bradley? The price tag on this could
The
end up
price
being...
tag is very high. I think that we need to focus on getting 93 built and improving the 10-year highway plan, which is chronically underfunded. That being said, I think you can make a case for bringing commuter rail to Nashua, but it has to be affordable, and I think that's always been the key issue. So to me, it would be more of a step-by-step approach.
Just to getting back to our Medicaid expansion, accessing federal dollars. We're talking about accessing federal dollars. Do we ideologically want to put a fence around New Hampshire saying no federal dollars because ideologically it's against our values? Or do we want to be practical and access federal dollars to do good things to help New Hampshire? That's the question, I think, on both of these.
And yet there would be a state-level subsidy for commuter rail. Indeed, you'd have to have something going in that direction.
Yeah, I think we leave too much federal money on the table and we don't access it because of match, because of sophisticated staff training and things like that we need to do to bring more federal money, as Senator Bradley said, to even it, that we're closer to the amount that we send. Today we're sending more money to Washington and returning. That's not a good system. We need to work hard to try to change that.
All right.
And I would just say, again, let's focus on getting I-93 built and make sure that we can afford commuter rail before we commit to it.
All right, Senator Bradley and
Thank you,
Senator
Adam.
Woodburn, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank
Much
you.
appreciated,
Yes,
and we'll be
thank
right
you.
back.